Let's get started with an anti-cheat breakthrough when it comes to Linux and SteamOS, plus Microsoft's answer to DLSS. PlayStation finally responded to their DRM nonsense that we've had all week. And then finally, if you're a Switch 2 owner, be careful which cartridges that you buy. If that sounds good, get subscribed, get comfortable, and let's get started. Since the Steam Deck came out 4 years ago, one of the biggest uphill battles that Valve has been fighting is getting publishers who make multiplayer games to support anti-cheat on Linux. You see, Valve's hardware runs on SteamOS, which is based off Arch Linux, which is, like I said, Linux. And there's not a whole lot of people who play video games on Linux. Maybe you do, I definitely do, but the vast majority of people who are playing games are playing it on Windows. If you look at the market share that Linux has when it comes to people who are answering the Steam survey, the number of people who are playing on Linux is about 5%, and it's been going up steadily. It's been actually doubling multiple times, but that 5% is such a small amount that a lot of publishers just look at it and they say, look, we get that you want to play our game, but if we let you play our game, then we have to make sure that the anti-cheat works the right way for you guys. And if we do that, then we have to pay people to deal with any tickets that come in. There's one more thing that we have to basically do. And they don't want to do that because they want to save some money. Until Linux reaches a market share that's large enough to make it so that it can't be ignored, well, I guess we're just going to be stuck like this. However, and when I tell you this story, you're going to be like, that doesn't seem like that big a deal. I could already play that game. Just hold on, I'll explain. Rocket League. I found this over at Gaming on Linux. Great site. If you haven't bookmarked it, you absolutely should. But Liam wrote this. It says, Rocket League adds easy anti-cheat with Steam Deck. Linux is still supported. So what does that mean? Well, I mean, Rocket League's been around for a really long time. In fact, there used to be a Linux version of Rocket League, which is why when I bought my original Steam controller, which you can see right here, looks like it's my eyeballs, it came with a copy of Rocket League. And when that game came out, I looked at it and I said, well, I don't care about soccer, and I care even less about soccer with cars, so no thank you. But then I played it and I was like hooked. That game was all I played for quite a long time. Really, really fun game. And a lot of people don't realize that's actually a sequel to a game called Supersonic Acrobatic Rocket-Powered Battle Cars. I can't believe I remembered that. But that's beside the point. So there was a Linux version. It was available on the old Steam machines back in 2015, and you could play it. So you might be thinking, all right, well, what's the big deal? Well, fast forward quite a few years, and Phoronix, hopefully I said that right, or no, not Phoronix, Psyonix sold Rocket League, or didn't sell Rocket League, got bought by Epic, okay? And Epic famously wants nothing to do with Steam. You know what I mean? So a lot of people were worried, okay, am I still going to be able to play my game? And yes, you could still play Rocket League. I have Rocket League on Steam, and if I want to, I can connect to their servers and play. Well, today, was it today? Yeah, today, as I record this morning, Psyonix has updated Rocket League to include Epic's easy anti-cheat, but they have enabled Linux support, which means if you are playing on a Steam Deck or a Steam machine, when those ever come out, if they come out, then you're going to be able to continue to play this game. And this is a really big deal. And here's why it's a really big deal. It's a really big deal because of who owns this game. They added in Epic's easy anti-cheat. Epic owns Psyonix. And I fully expected that they would have said, well, we understand that means that certain Linux players aren't going to be able to play anymore. We're sorry about that, but this is what's best for our customer base as a whole. And then they could just walk away and do exactly what they do with Fortnite, where they say, sorry, you can't play it on Linux. Now, I can see other companies using easy anti-cheat, and supporting Linux and it not being a big deal. But the fact that Psyonix is owned by Epic, and Epic has said, yep, we're going to support anti-cheat on Linux with our anti-cheat system on our game, I think that maybe is the first domino to fall. Maybe it's the canary in the coal mine. Sorry to mix my metaphors, but you look at the big games that you can't currently play on SteamOS. And there are quite a few of them. Now, lucky for me, most of them are not games that I'm interested in. But for the ones that you can't play them on SteamOS. And that could mean, okay, well, then I don't want to pick up a Steam machine, or I don't want to play on Bazite, or I don't want to get a Steam Deck. Well, maybe this is the first domino that starts to fall, and it starts to knock down the other ones. If Epic Games, who's famously anti-Valve, if Epic Games has decided that there's enough Linux players that they want to support them, then that is huge, absolutely huge. And maybe other developers and publishers that are using anti-cheat, maybe Epic's Easy Anti-Cheat or other anti-cheat systems, maybe those will also start to follow suit. I remember recently reading about EA wanting to get, and I can't remember which game it was for, but they wanted to get a programmer to start working on getting Javelin, which is their anti-cheat solution, to work on SteamOS or Linux in general. And so we're starting to see the cracks form when it comes to anti-cheat on SteamOS and on Linux. And I think this is absolutely huge. Whenever you say, well, get a Steam Deck or pick up a Steam machine, or this is why I like to use Bazite, there's always people that say, yes, but I can't do that because the games I want to play aren't there. Well, maybe they will be soon. Next up, we heard about this a while ago, but now it looks like we finally have access to it if you are on the Xbox Insiders channel, which I am for regular Windows. I don't know if I'm on the correct Insiders channel for this, but Microsoft has finally unveiled AutoSR, or they've made it available for people to start testing AutoSR. If you don't know what AutoSR is, it's basically like DLSS or XESS or FSR. And if that just sounded like a bunch of alphabet salad that I threw at you, yeah, I meant to say alphabet soup, but I'm going to say alphabet salad from now on. If that sounds like a bunch of alphabet salad that I said just a second ago, let me explain what it does. Basically, these are all upscalers. They allow you to run a game at a lower resolution, and then they upscale that game to a higher resolution, but you're actually running it at a lower resolution, but it looks like it's running at a higher resolution. Now, that might sound like ridiculous magic where you would go and watch an old sci-fi show where or not even a sci-fi show. Maybe you're watching an old mystery like from the 90s and they're like looking at the computer screen of a blurry picture on the camera and they're like, enhance this photo so that we can figure out who the killer is. And then they magically were able to enhance it and it's perfectly clear. Whenever I saw that, my brain always said, that's stupid. Ain't no way that that's ever going to work. And now you kind of can look at something that's kind of blurry and fuzzy and sharpen it up and make it look better, it's wild to me that you can do that. It doesn't come without its shortcomings because quite often you will see things like artifacting. You'll see big blocks of similar colors all together as the system is struggling to figure out what exactly to do with those pixels there. If there's a lot of small stuff moving around like particle effects, that'll usually trip up the upscaling system, and you'll definitely be able to see that thing. Usually around like hair on a character or something, you'll see like this weird fringiness that comes with this upscaling. Now, of all of the upscalers, DLSS is the best. I'm not going to say DLSS 5. I'm just going to say DLSS does a better job at upscaling all of this stuff than everybody else. But Microsoft has what they call AutoSR. And I found this article over at The Verge. And basically, Microsoft is starting to test its automatic super resolution, also known as AutoSR, feature with the Xbox Ally X. AutoSR first debuted on some Copilot Plus PCs nearly 2 years ago, improving visual quality and frame rates in select games. Now Microsoft is testing it for docked play on the Xbox Ally X, allowing the 7-inch handheld to improve resolution and graphical settings for bigger TV screens. Okay, let's talk about this for a second. So you're playing on this tiny 7-inch screen, which means you can play at a really low resolution and everything's going to look fine. But then you take your Xbox Ally X and you dock it to your TV so that you can play on the big screen, but you're playing at a low resolution. And so when it blows up, everything looks all pixelated and blurry and fuzzy, and it just doesn't look very good. That's why when I use my Steam Deck, I almost never dock my Steam Deck. When I want to play a game on my Steam Deck and then pick up where I left off on the big screen, I play on my computer, and my computer happens to use Steam Cloud saves, so it works just fine. But this is allowing you to use just the same device. Now on the Steam Deck, you can use FSR. I think FSR 2 is on there by default, and you can turn that on and it works, but it's not nearly as good as DLSS. I have not seen AutoSR in person yet. I'm going to see if I can figure out how it works maybe over this weekend, and maybe I'll put out a video if I can actually see a real difference. I'm always really terrible at seeing this stuff. But AutoSR is now there, and it allows you to take that game that you've been playing in handheld, dock it, and keep playing the same game at pretty much the same performance, but that's going to upscale the resolution so that it actually looks nice. Here's the quote that they said. Docked play means larger screens and higher resolutions where drops in image quality are more noticeable, or where some games struggle to maintain a smooth FPS. That's exactly the problem AutoSR was designed to solve, so we're starting to preview it with docked mode, where we expect players will see the most value. Now, one thing that I do think is important to point out, just like on the Steam Deck, where you're turning on FSR not on a game-by-game basis, because you can have games that support FSR, you can have games that support XeSS or DLSS, but for games that don't support FSR, on the Steam Deck, there's a little toggle. You could just turn it on and it will do FSR anyway. That comes with one caveat, that it's not nearly as good as when the game actually supports it. Now, this is kind of the same thing, because if you look right here in the article, it says not every game will ship with DLSS, AMD's FSR, or Intel's XeSS, but Microsoft's AutoSR is built into Windows and can apply super resolution to existing games without game integrated options. And then they say it's not clear how well it'll work against a variety of different games. My guess is it's going to work similar to how FSR works on the Steam Deck. And I think that this is a big breakthrough for anybody who's not interested in playing games on SteamOS or Bazite or Linux in general. People who use Windows all the time because maybe they, are playing games that require anti-cheat that don't currently support Linux, or maybe they're Game Pass players. Well, they're now going to be able to use this upscaling technology on every single game that they play, whether it's automatically supported or not. I think that's a big deal. Next up, I want to talk a little bit about Sony. They were in the news quite a bit this week because there was fears that they had implemented a new kind of DRM that would basically mean that your console had to be online so that it could refresh your licenses to your games every 30 days. And for some reason, Sony stayed quiet on this for multiple days in a row. Well, finally, yesterday, they have responded, and here's what they said. Found this article over at Insider Gaming, and when you scroll down, it says, players can continue to access and play their purchased games as usual. A one-time online check is required to confirm the game's license, after which no further check-ins are required, which I think is good news. I have no problem with a one-time check-in when you buy a game, because it's a digital game. When you're buying the game, you're online. So as soon as you launch that game for the first time, you've checked that box and you can move on with your life, and you don't have to worry about checking in ever again. So it makes perfect sense why you would have to check in one time. The reason everybody got confused is because somebody had seen like this countdown clock of 30 days. And they were assumed, I mean, incorrectly, but I would have made the same assumption too, is that when that countdown clock hits 0, time's up. You got to recheck in or you will no longer be able to play your game. Now, there's definitely some arguments to be said as to everybody's connected to the internet these days. And is it okay for companies to force you to have to check in all the time to maintain your licenses? And I would say, even though everybody has access to the internet today, I would say no. I don't think it's okay. I think it's fine to do it once, but having to do it over and over and over again, it just feels like they're waiting for something to break, and then suddenly I won't be able to play anymore. Like the minute that Sony shuts down the server that does that check, my game that I paid for isn't going to be able to connect to that server, and then it's going to be like, oh, I'm sorry, I guess you can't play this game anymore. And I just don't trust any company to keep the one server that you need on in order to check the license off, to keep it on forever. We've seen so many times where companies have basically shut down servers, and then the money that you spent on their game, they're just like, yeah, that's too bad. This is where the Stop Killing Games initiative comes into play, which is huge and awesome, and I love that they're doing that kind of thing. Game preservation is incredibly important. Games are art as far as I'm concerned, and they belong in a museum, and they can't be in a museum once the servers get shut down. And more importantly than that, as the customers that pay money for these things, as somebody who buys almost everything digitally, I don't buy any physical media pretty much. I understand that I don't own anything. I've paid for it, they own it. And, that is not cool. Could I buy physical media? Sure, I could. But for certain things, it just doesn't make any sense. I'm primarily a PC player. There is pretty much no physical media for PC these days. On top of that, when I'm playing on like the Nintendo Switch, I want to take all my games with me. I don't want to carry around a bunch of cartridges. I don't want to be downstairs playing a game, want to play something different, and then be like, oh, I don't have that cartridge with me, so now I got to go upstairs. For home consoles, it definitely makes a lot more sense. But for PC and portables, it makes a lot less sense to go full physical. And on top of that, there's tons of games that aren't even released in physical form, and you don't have any other choice than to buy them digitally. And someday, when the servers get shut down, not being able to play games that you paid for is not cool. So I'm fine with a one-time check-in, because at the point of sale, that's when you're online anyway. But after that, I don't want to have to keep checking in. And there's going to be people that say, but Valve makes you check in every single time. They do. When you launch a game, it checks to see if you own it. And if you're not online, it'll be like, well, are you sure that you can do this? But they have a solution, and that's offline mode. And basically the way that works is you buy a game, you launch it, and then you can turn it off, and then you can put it in offline mode. And then the next time you launch it, it doesn't check. And you just keep playing for as long as you want until you reconnect to the internet, and then it rechecks at that point. Again, I wish that we didn't have to check all the time. I wish games would just come without any DRM at all, like on GOG. But there's a lot of places that are a lot of games that aren't on GOG. And so we buy those games on Steam, and we have to deal with the DRM. That's exactly what Steam is. It's DRM. But the same thing is happening with the main consoles. They're pushing away from physical media and towards digital media. And so we got to make sure that they are not up to no good, that they're not up to shenanigans, and that we're always going to be able to play our Xbox games, our PlayStation games, and our Nintendo Switch 2 games. And speaking of Nintendo Switch 2, you got to be real careful where you're getting your physical media from, because if you get a fake card, you might get screwed over and your Switch could stop working. I saw this story over at Twisted Voxel. Basically, what happened is somebody bought a resale copy of a game on Amazon. It turned out to be fake. Then they put it in their Nintendo Switch 2. They figured out that it was a fake. And then when they tried to eject it, it wouldn't come out. So then they had to yank it out, and it ended up damaging their actual console. Now, the one thing that I want to point out is that when you are buying these games, these secondhand games, you don't know if somebody is selling you a real one or if they're selling you a fake one, unless you like are doing it on Facebook Marketplace, and then you could say, all right, show me your Nintendo Switch 2 with the game running first. Or if you go to GameStop and you're like, all right, they probably have checked if the game works before they resell it. Like people, I used to work in a video game store. When people brought in games, you make sure that they worked before you gave them any money for it. You know what I mean? So I'm sure that those two locations are probably safer bets. But if you're just buying something off Amazon and it's not new, like if it's like new instead, then you might get a fake, and it might break your Switch 2. And $450 for the Switch 2, that's not a small amount of money. So you definitely want to make sure that this thing keeps working. So be very careful where you're buying your cartridges from. Anyway, that's the news roundup for today. If you guys enjoyed it, make sure that you hit that like button and subscribe. And if it's your first time here from the Nerd Nest, I'm Bill. Thanks for watching. Stay rad, everybody. Bye-bye.